I ultimately made my neighbor pay a humiliating price for harassing my dying father. And it all started with her banging on my door with a completely unreasonable demand. This happened about 4 or 5 years ago. But the memory still fills me with a white-hot anger, only cooled by the satisfaction of the eventual revenge. The story begins with me, Liam, looking for my first property. My father was battling cancer at the time. And due to a frustrating healthcare technicality, he needed to prove he lived in my province for more than half the year to get his treatments covered. My parents were staying rent-free with a friend. But to create an official paper trail, they signed on to the lease and utilities for the new place I was buying. We found the perfect spot. It was a smaller building, dog-friendly, 2 beds, 2 baths, and just a 5-minute drive from the hospital where my partner worked and my dad was receiving his care. It felt like fate. However, as I sifted through years of condo board meeting minutes, a red flag appeared. There were records of a bitter, ongoing dispute between the unit's previous owners and the people living directly below. It had involved noise complaints from both sides, police calls, and eventually, a very expensive sound evaluation contractor. His report was our saving grace. He found the flooring was installed to a standard double the building code requirements and stated that any further complaints would be ignored on the matter. With that assurance, we bought the place. For 3 months, there was blissful silence. My partner and I are quiet people, and we'd nearly forgotten about the drama we'd read about. Then, my parents moved in. My dad's treatments had become far more aggressive, and he was spending most of his time at home, sleeping up to 16 hours a day. That rest was crucial for his recovery. They took the second bedroom, which had been vacant until then. And that's when we met Tiffany. She was the entitled princess living in the 1-bedroom suite on the first floor, directly under my parents' new room. She was supposedly in pre-med at the nearby university. But as one person later rightly observed, it takes a special kind of person to have so little empathy for a sick man and still think they're fit to practice medicine. The first incident happened a week after my parents arrived. I had 2 friends over on a Sunday, around noon. They had literally just walked through the door when a sharp knock echoed. I opened it to find Tiffany standing there, looking annoyed. "Hi. I'm from downstairs and I am trying to study," she said flatly. "Please keep it down." I had mentally prepared for this conversation. "Listen," I said calmly. "It is Sunday afternoon. We are not having a party or making excessive noise. We have been, and always will be, respectful of our neighbors. Have a nice day." Later that day, in an effort to be a good neighbor, I bought a pair of high-quality noise-canceling earbuds, left them outside her door with a note apologizing for any unintentional noise, and reiterated that we were well within the building's bylaws. A couple of days later, I was moving a piece of furniture in my parents' room when I heard a loud bang from below. I paused, figuring she was just hanging a picture. But then it happened again. And a third time. It was rhythmic, aggressive. Then, a door slammed downstairs. And seconds later, someone was pounding on my front door. I opened it to Tiffany, her face contorted with rage. "What the fuck are you doing up here?" she shrieked. It took me a second to process. "Were you just banging on the ceiling with a broom?" I asked, incredulous. "You bet I was," she screamed back. "You need to keep it down. I'm in PREMED and I'm studying." You are banging around and I can't focus. In that moment, her frustration boiled over into outright aggression. It was a foolish decision. One that set her on a path she couldn't see the end of. A path that would lead directly to her own downfall. I am not a confrontational person. But this was too much. If you have a complaint, take it to the condo board, I said, my voice hard. Banging on the ceiling is completely unacceptable. And I slammed the door in her face. I immediately filed a complaint with the condo board myself, explaining her harassment and how unacceptable it was, especially given my father's fragile health. The board issued her a warning: if she banged on the walls or ceiling again, she'd receive a $500 fine for each incident. Her mother, who lived out of town, promptly sent a nasty email to me and the board, complaining about how her princess needed to study and how the fat people shouldn't be stomping around. For the record, I'm 6 feet tall and 160 pounds. And my partner is 5 feet 3 inches and 100 pounds. The banging stopped. But then Tiffany started her campaign of psychological warfare. Instead of a broom, her weapon of choice became a stereo. If we walked across the floor, moved a chair, or accidentally dropped something, she would crank up her music. It was so loud I could make out the lyrics to songs I'd never heard. And the bass would physically shake objects in my apartment. Since her unit didn't share walls with anyone else, we were the only victims. It was a strange sort of logic. To study better, she needed silence. But to punish us for her perceived lack of silence, she'd blast her own music so loud you had to wonder, as one person later pointed out, how she could possibly get any studying done herself. The music would often blast past 11 p.m. When I called condo board members that late, no one would answer. The non-emergency police line was equally unhelpful, offering to send someone out in a couple of hours for a simple warning. Then, it got worse. She started turning the music on full blast and just leaving the house for the entire day. We endured 12 to 16 hours of non-stop thumping bass every single day. The constant noise was more than an annoyance. It was a direct threat to my father's health. He needed sleep to recover between his grueling treatments, and she was stealing that from him. The stress was weighing heavily on my entire family. In desperation, I wrote an open letter to the entire building, detailing the harassment, and slipped a copy under every door. It changed nothing. I rented a decibel meter and logged the noise levels. With nothing going on, my home was about 40 dB. With her music, it was 65 to 70 dB. For context, 70 dB is like having a vacuum cleaner running in your own living room. The condo board acknowledged she was breaking the rules, but refused to do anything more than issue warnings. I was at my wit's end. I had to prove she was doing it intentionally to harass us, or find some other way to force the board's hand. I spent hours combing through the condo documents, searching for a loophole. Anything. And then, a thought struck me: there was no way a 19-year-old student paid for this condo herself. And there it was. The key. It wasn't about noise levels anymore. Using some connections, I got a copy of the land title for her unit. This single piece of paper changed the entire game, shifting the power dynamic in a way Tiffany and her mother could never have anticipated. I had found my golden goose. On a Thursday night, during a blizzardy Canadian February, I called an emergency meeting with the board at 9:30 p.m. They looked exhausted and deeply annoyed to be there. But I came prepared. I laid out a stack of papers, scanned sections of the condo documents, my detailed noise logs, and a letter drafted by a lawyer friend. I read the letter aloud. It threatened direct legal action against the board for negligence and for ignoring my complaints and the provable damages to my family's health and well-being. Suddenly, they were sitting up straight. The board president's expression soured. They looked at me, then at the mountain of evidence. Their faces grim. "I won't file this," I said, letting the threat hang in the air. "If the board resolves this issue tonight, then..." I played my trump card. I slid the copy of the land title certificate across the table. On it was not Tiffany's name, but her mother's. "According to your own bylaws," I explained, pointing to another document, "if the owner is not residing in the unit, then Tiffany is technically a tenant, not an owner." I let that sink in before delivering the final blow. And this next section details the punishments for tenants. After 2 warnings for bylaw infractions, which I have printed copies of right here, a tenant can be legally evicted. The president, trying to save face, scoffed. "Going 5 dB over isn't that bad. You're blowing this out of proportion." I was furious. Had she heard nothing? Knowing full well the music was blasting at that very moment. I said, "Fine. It's now 10:20 p.m. Let's go listen." We all shuffled down the hall to my unit. I unlocked the door, and we stepped inside. The air itself seemed to vibrate. We stood in my kitchen, listening to the same horrible, thumping pop song that had been on repeat all day. The board president opened her mouth to speak and had to visibly raise her voice to be heard over the noise. "She plays it like this all the time?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Yes," I said. "I will go ask her to turn it off," she declared. "You can try," I replied calmly. "But she isn't home. She left this morning." Her face was a mask of disbelief. "What do you mean? She has left her music playing this loud all day?" "Yes." The president was now visibly furious. As if on cue, the bass vibrated through the floor, making the spoons in a nearby drawer rattle. The other board members looked at each other with dark expressions. She snatched up my documents and said, "We will call the condo lawyer." Saturday morning arrived. I hadn't heard anything from the board, and the apartment was quiet. As I was making coffee, I heard the unfamiliar sound of the patio door below me opening and closing repeatedly. I walked to the window, coffee in hand, still in my bathrobe. And there, I witnessed a beautiful winter miracle. A fresh blanket of snow covered everything, and trudging through the deep drifts was Tiffany, looking cold and miserable, carrying boxes to a U-Haul truck. The sight was so sweet. I sipped my coffee in pure pleasure. She looked up and saw me watching from the window. Her grimace twisted into a fiery glower that could have killed me if not for the glass between us. I just smiled broadly and gave her a little wave. A little later, an email from the board confirmed it all. They had contacted her mother and threatened an immediate eviction, plus the maximum $500 fine for every single future complaint I made. Apparently, Tiffany decided to move out rather than test my resolve. For the next 3 hours, I got to watch her and one small friend struggle to haul large, heavy furniture through the deep snow. Every time she walked back to the building for another load, She could see me and my family watching her from the window. Only after the U-Haul was packed and gone for good did I finally breathe a true sigh of relief. Ultimately, the story proves that when bullies try to brute force their way through a problem, the most powerful revenge is found not in stooping to their level, but in meticulous research and the quiet, irrefutable power of the rules they chose to ignore. Have you ever had to deal with a neighbor from hell? And what creative solutions did you find to restore your peace?